Good morning, everybody. And it is a Monday morning. And of course, it is December 21st. Don't forget that tonight is supposed to be the best time to see the Jupiter and Saturn coming together to create the Christmas star. So if you haven't gotten out and looked at it already, remember to do that tonight. I need to remember to do that tonight because honestly, I meant to go last night and then got tied up with Sunday night worship, and Scotty and I had to cook. So I didn't get that done. But tonight I plan to run out right after I get done here at 5 and go take a peek at the sunset. Southwest sky is what they say. About an hour after sunset is what I'm told is the best time. So with that out of hand, when we're done with that, today we're going to be looking at chapter 16 in Luke's Gospel. We're jumping ahead a chapter, and we're going to tackle what's probably one of the, if not the most difficult parables in Scripture, not just in Luke's Gospel, but all of Scripture. It is a tough one. And we have to remember what we just ended up with. We just ended up with the prodigal son. So when we're digesting this, it's best to, and especially when it says, then Jesus says to his disciples. So it's just following immediately after the story of the prodigal son. So we'll try to digest this with that in mind, that grace and that forgiveness that's involved in the story of the prodigal son. But nonetheless, no matter what, this is a tough parable to try to digest. And so let's take a look. Today I'm going to break it off at chapter 16, verses 1 to 12. A lot of times they include 13 in this chunk of Scripture, but I think 13 belongs with what's coming next. So what we do tomorrow. So I want 13 tomorrow. Not today, 13 tomorrow. So we're going to 1 to 12 today and try to figure this out as best we can and to try to make some sense of it if we can. Because like I said, this is probably the most troubling parable in all of the Gospels. So the parable of the dishonest manager is what NRSV calls it. Some call it the shrewd manager. They have different titles there, but let's see what's going on. I think dishonest is probably a better word than shrewd, the way I understand this anyway. Then Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So they summoned him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Then the manager said to himself, what will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that I am when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly and make it 50. Then he asked another, and how much do you owe? He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly, for the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you with the true riches? And if I have not been faithful, with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? Boy, I'm having trouble reading today. It must be Monday. You'd never know it by the way I'm reading. Anyway, sometimes people are thinking, well, Jesus is telling this guy to be dishonest. Well, that's not really true. I think that last bit tells us that. You're saying, if then you have not been faithful with dishonest wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? And if you have been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? If you've not been faithful with what you're managing, then who's going to let you, why would you be trusted with your own property? Of course, none of us has real property. We have to remember that all of our property we're holding in stewardship for God. Everything is God's creation. So with that, I think there's a way to look at this, and I've talked about this before. I preached over this last year, and I still like the way I looked at it then and the way I look at it now hasn't changed. I think that there's a way to understand this and not put Jesus in a bad light, or Jesus is telling people to be dishonest. I think what's going on here is that here we have a rich man. He has a property owner. He owns land. Now we have to understand how land was rented out in ancient times. Today, you know, we're an agricultural community. I come from an ag background. My father was a rancher and a farmer, and we rented land, and we didn't rent out land, but we rented land, and we had a lot of rented ground as well as ground that father owned as well. So you had different agreements with different tenants, or different landlords rather. Some landlords wanted cash rent, and some wanted sharecrop. And so you ended up and my ex-mother-in-law, she was a farmer. She did hers on sharecrop, where they were paying her a percentage of the crop. And so usually it's 60-40, 50-50, something like that. It just depends on what's common in that part of the country. But what was going on over there was that they were doing kind of a different, cash rent. Usually it's a set price. Okay, sharecrop, you get a percentage of the crop. They did something different. What they did was, you rent this ground and I get X number of bushels. Not a percentage, but this is how many bushels, or this is how many jugs of oil if it's a vineyard. And here it looks like he's got both cropland and he's got some olive orchards or something, because one of the guys is saying, I owe you this many, this much oil, and the other one's saying, I owe you this many bushels. So that's what's going on here. Now let's also remember how things were done in that part of the world. For example, the tax collectors. And when they were dealing with the tax collectors, the government came in and would hire the tax collector and say, this is how much tax is due from this region. And that's what the tax collector paid to the government, whether it was to the Romans or whoever it was governing at the time. They paid X number of dollars to the government. Now they would go out in turn and try to collect the taxes from the people of that area, that region, whatever their geographic area was that they were assigned. Or they might hire, subcontract out to other tax collectors. But they would then mark it up and say, if it was $100 for this area, well, I'm going to subcontract, I want 110. And then that guy that got it for 110 goes out and collects $120 of taxes, because he's got to make a profit. But the only thing is, he might mark it up a lot more than that. He might collect 150. It just depends on what his greed level was. There was nothing about what they were to collect. It was about what they had to pay the Romans or whoever else. And the same thing here. The owner of the properties made a deal with this manager. You manage it, I get 100 bushels or whatever. That's what I want. The manager goes to the people and says, well, I need 150 bushels for you to rent this property from my boss, my lord, small L. And so what's going on here is, I think that the owner has found out that this manager is kind of he's abusing his position. He's charging too much from these folks. And so he's going to just, I want to know what give me an accounting. For whatever reason, he hasn't been getting accounting. I want to know what you're charging the people for this. And then I will see what you've been paying me. And we'll see how these two reconcile, and see whether you've been abusing this position that I've put you in, this ability that I've given you, because the land owns to me, and this is what generates the wealth, is the land. So it's not, this is where it comes from. This is the root of it all. The roots are in the ground. That's the root of the wealth. So the wise manager, or the shrewd manager, whatever you want to call him, or dishonest manager, he's like, this is not good. I'm going to have to come clean with the boss man. So he calls in these guys and says, what is it? Oh, I'm so magnanimous, I'm going to mark it down to what it should have been. And so now it's going to look like I'm such a great guy, because I'm going to lose my job. And it's going to look like I'm such a great, and I wouldn't get this markup, because it's going to go to the next manager, or the next manager will change the deal, or the landlord will take over running it, and then he'll change the deal. So he's going to mark it down so these people have favor with him, so that when it's done, he might be able to go to them and say, listen, I really need some help. I need a job. I need whatever. I did you a favor, so help me out. And it looks like he's magnanimous, don't it? So what he's done is he's taken care of that sin, that injury that he's caused to these people. And so he's reconciled. And we're looking back, again, like I said, we're looking back to what was yesterday and the day before with the prodigal son, and being reconciled and getting restoration. And so he is now dealt honestly with, rather than being dishonest, he's dealt honestly with the tenants, and now the landowner comes and says, you've found the error of your ways. I heard these bad things about you, but now I see that you've corrected the situation, and because you've done that, we're restored, we're reconciled. Okay. And that's how I see this parable. That, to me, that's the only way I can read this parable and have it really make sense to me, and where I can walk away from it with a message. And really, the only way I can understand it in the context of where it's jammed in here, with what's coming, or what came Friday and Saturday, and what we're going to look at this week on really Wednesday. And tomorrow we'll talk about the serving two masters, but it's really what comes after that where I see that these are two very short things we're going to be looking at Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. But it's about reconciliation of what's going on here, and sticking with commitments. And so that's how I see this parable should be digested. I may be wrong. If you have a different idea, man, please don't. That's not a problem. If you want to share with me, give me a holler or post it down below. I'm happy to look at other ways to understand this, but we have to remember the context, the time, and the way that the things operated then. And it's my understanding that what I've just told you is the way that the land was dealt with, and that was how things were done. And thus, that gives me an indication of why I think the way I do. So with that, I'm going to let you go. And we started the week off with a reasonably long one. Not the longest by any means. But don't forget, I will remind you as I exit stage left, don't forget, Christmas Eve, Thursday night, we are going to have service in the sanctuary. We also will live stream it. It'll be a much better experience in person, but if you want to watch it on live stream, you are welcome. But we will be doing basically a hymn sing. That's not what Catherine's calling it. The title she wanted to give it, I think, is a Christmas carol, because we're singing carols, Christmas hymns. They're not really, there are more hymns than carols. But at any rate, we're singing Christmas songs. A lot of different ones, but not the entire song for a lot of them. Some of them were just singing the first verse, some were singing a couple verses, some were singing the whole thing. But she's just kind of picked it through. She was planning on having people pick some of the songs, and she decided instead to just sing one verse of the ones that she kind of was going to give people options on. So sorry about that, but she decided that would be easier to just do that, but still give us a chance to experience a little bit of those songs that we really, really love. That's one of the sad parts about Christmas time and the singing and worship, is that we can't possibly get through all the great Christmas songs. There's so many of them. We just can't get to all of them. So this kind of give us a chance to at least experience a little bit of them, and to lift them up in praise and worship. So with that, 6 o'clock Thursday night, come on down and see us, or tune in on Facebook and watch the live stream. All right. Have a very blessed day. And as always, please be a blessing to someone today. We'll see you in the morning. Bye-bye.